Sunday, May 7th, 2017. I'm at the edge of the Tamarack bog at Dead Horse Lake. It is spring and things are starting to bloom. The birds are singing and the dog is happy. Aren't you, Ivor, the timber dog? And I'm standing on this spot that may not look like much to anybody, but if you study this, I've put a tremendous amount of work into this little spot, along with many others. But there's some really good. There are some really good things going on here, and I can't think of a spot where I see more of our species, local species, and it's a great spot to tell the story about the products and the effort that goes into growing the trees that make those products. So what all have we got here? Well, the most obvious thing is the tamarack in the swamp, and then yellow birch in the swamp, and there's black ash here too. So those are three key species. It's a little spongy. That's all right. So there's a dead tamarack, unfortunately, and another one, but a nice live one behind. And for those of you who don't know, tamarack is an evergreen or a conifer that loses its needles in the winter, just like the deciduous trees lose their leaves. Many people look at a tamarack bog and they think it's all dead, but it's not. And they're absolutely beautiful green when they first start to bud out. It's stunning. They're stunning in the spring and they're stunning in the fall. Anyway, so that's tamarack, and there's not a lot of ash right in this particular spot. I'll show you some in a minute, but we are being very purposeful in preserving the yellow birch and encouraging the yellow birch in these spots, because the black ash will eventually completely succumb to emerald ash borer, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So we're planning for, within the next 50 to 100 years of transitioning to other species that are suitable for these sites. There's a really nice yellow birch. What do you smell, Ivor? Ivor just got back from graduate school. He did real well, but he was gone for 3 weeks, and boy did I miss him. I'm really happy to have him back, and I think he's happy to be here, aren't you, buddy? There's a yellow birch. I've pruned that tree in the past. They are average in terms of the quality response to pruning. There's a pruned limb right there, or what's left of a pruned limb, and that's starting to grow over and beginning the process of growing clear lumber instead of limby, knotty lumber. But there's an epicormic branch that has subsequently grown in, and so the yellow birch does tend to rebranch. Not always, but quite often. So you got to stick with it, and you just hope that there are a number of trees that are so healthy and so strong that they don't feel the need to branch back out. They don't need the branches on the low part of the tree. They've got enough branches on the upper part of the tree. Here's an oak that's been pruned and is doing real well. Those branches right there are epicormic branches that have come after the initial pruning. So I probably tried to prune that one a little bit too high, too early. That's okay, we'll come back and we'll get it again. That is the beginning of a really high quality tree. See how straight that is and healthy? And I'm finding more and more, as I talked about this winter in some other posts, that the oak that's growing along the edge of these wet areas, they get significant nutrients and moisture, and they just seem to do really well. And as long as there's no beaver activity, which there isn't up here away from the lake, they do just fine on these, in this wet edge, right down to the edge. Never in the water, but right on the edge of the water. So we're recognizing and looking for any oak that are in these transition areas. I've never read anywhere in the literature that I've been trying to read that that this is good oak area, but my experience now and observations are that it sure is. More yellow birch, and then always an abundance of balsam. And we don't make flooring or anything like that out of balsam, but we sure make high quality studs, and those are important too. They stay straight and they're pretty easy to work with. There's a soft maple that will come out at some point when we need to do some release work for these crop trees, and that's just pulpwood. All right, there's some paper birch here, and like so much of our paper birch, it's suffering from old age. It's not even very big, but it's pretty old. There are a couple of yellow or white birch that are still alive, but they're starting to go. But as most of you know who have bought anything from us or follow us, we make a tremendous amount of paper birch product, flooring, tongue and groove plant paneling, and moldings more than anything. There's a bur oak, and they can grow upland as well as right on the transition area and even out in the water. And they tend to grow gun barrel straight, and they make beautiful, beautiful flooring and tongue and groove paneling. Just about anything you can make out of it, but it's so dense and it's so stable that it's a real favorite of mine for making flooring especially. A lot of ironwood in here, and that will have to be taken out at some point to reduce the competition on the crop trees. We have an abundance of hard maple, and most of it will be firewood or pulpwood, but we keep an eye out for the well-formed straight ones that seem to have a lot of vigor and potential for continued quality growth, and there's one right there. I'm pretty sure I've pruned that tree, and it's got a little bit of competition here from some ironwood, but not bad. And that'll make tremendous flooring or tongue and groove paneling. Here's an area where I saw at least four red oak, and they were competing with a lot of brush, hazel brush, and some ironwood, and also some balsam. So I aggressively cleared this with the brush saw, and I think an earlier visit to this spot with lopping shears. But anyway, these are high potential oak trees. That one's been pruned and has not resprouted limbs. That's going to be a good tree. That's probably the best one right on this site. It's just the strongest and is showing the most growth potential. There's a big old soft maple that is overtopping these, providing it some protection right now, but the oak really doesn't need any protection, and it doesn't really like the competition for sun. And so that's going to have to come out. Problem with letting these soft maple get so big is that when it's time to remove it from the overstory, it's going to do a lot of damage, and that tree is leaning this way, so it's going to take something out. It's probably going to end up taking out that other oak there. And then black ash. Even though the black ash doesn't have a long future, it's got a significant medium-term future, and maybe we'll come up with a solution for the emerald ash borer, but at this point it's not looking very promising. So my theory is what ash we have, we better accelerate the growth on it to get it to merchantable size as soon as possible. And then when it is, we need to be aggressively harvesting it like we did this summer. Well, I'm sorry, this past winter, which I talked a lot about. So what I'm doing to try to accelerate the growth on the black ash is to reduce the stem count and leave the highest quality trees and prune them up. They respond fabulously to pruning. Very rarely do we get any epicormic response. So we're able to prune these up super high, more than half the height, and they seem to grow really, really well. There's a tree that I cut down, and it doesn't kill it. It just responds with a whole bunch of branches like that, and it's basically deer food. You can see the deer love the ash. They really chew the heck out of those. But usually where there's ash regeneration, it's in such abundance that the deer get some of it, but not all of it. Now we have to be careful not to, oh, why do you drink that garbage water, Ike? Sorry, Ike was our last dog. But anyway, the problem with taking out too much of any species in these ash areas is that the water table will rise and cause trouble if you don't have enough trees here going through their process of transpiration and soaking up the water. So it affects the water table and it changes everything. And if that water table rises too much, it'll flood out the timber, and we'll have gone in the wrong direction in terms of quality. More paper birch. We get paper birch in abundance quantity-wise, but we don't get paper birch in abundance quality-wise. For one thing, if you don't take these clumps and reduce them down to 1 or at most 2 stems early on, then they grow like this, and they don't get very big and they don't grow very straight because they have to grow away from each other to eventually have room for all of those tops. So wherever we can, we are treating our young birch only in the sites that make sense, putting a bunch of effort into them and reducing them to single stems and giving them some room to grow fast. But we're only doing it on north slopes where the soil is right, because with what appears to me to be warming climate and drier soils, the birch just doesn't want to grow on the south slopes or in the wrong types of soils. Okay, and then that leaves us with white pine, obviously one of our favorite and signature trees. You think he's excited? We've also got some nice cedar here, and even though cedar is a real challenge quality-wise, in terms of the quality of the trees and the logs that come out of the trees, but the little bit of lumber that we finally do glean from them is fabulous, and we make some great cedar products, both interior and exterior. So there is the one white pine tree in this immediate area that is going to be the source of all of our natural regeneration, and it's starting to show here as we've disturbed this site a little bit by punching in this trail in preparation for future logging. And we've got some sunlight coming in here now, and I bud capped here last fall, I believe, and we've got a decent amount of natural white pine regeneration, and that's really important because we're not going to do a lot more underplanting. We're going to rely on natural regeneration, but it's going to be a lot of work still because we have to create the conditions for the natural regeneration. And there's what we're looking for right there. And that's been bud capped to protect the terminal leader or bud, or the bud of the terminal leader, from deer browse. Because unlike the deciduous trees, which will branch out in the absence of a terminal bud, the white pine rarely does that. And then just a few other things that we've got here that are really important. Always the basswood. And even though that's not high quality, there's some product in there. There's a big old maple, hard maple. We won't get anything out of that. And then finally, I know I already said finally, but this time finally, down in this ravine, which is draining from that highland swamp that we just looked at, down into Dead Horse Lake. We've got kind of a narrow area where the water is moving through rapidly, and we generally have dry conditions most of the year, relatively dry conditions. That's just ideal for rapid quality ash growth, and there is an absolutely spectacular tree. It'll be sound. It's probably 18 inches in diameter at breast height, which is how we measure size of trees. And it's good and tall, so we're going to get a lot of product out of that someday. I just love these little streams in the spring with the water moving through. Even though it's swamp water, it's still pretty clean, so we are blessed with clean water in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, in the upper Mississippi watershed, and we need to do everything we can to protect that. And the single best thing we can do is to keep forests in forest and not to convert them to other uses. And to do that, we need to make ownership of forest land economical for the landowner. And the best way to do that is to grow quality trees of super high value. Otherwise, the landowner ultimately sells or converts to non-forested use, either agriculture or development. I realize we got to do some development, but doing the development in the right areas, smart areas, and then doing smart type of development is really important. Signing out.